Hello everyone, welcome to Edfu.
The city of Edfu is located halfway between Luxor and Aswan. It's famous for the ancient sanctuary of Horus, a gigantic temple built gradually by successive Ptolemaic kings, from Ptolemy III to Cleopatra VII, a true symbol of the power of their dynasty. As you'll see, it's huge, perhaps the largest temple complex in Egypt, right after Kanak. It's certainly Egypt's most well-preserved temple. It stood safely on a hill that wasn't affected by the floods of the Nile. Buried under the desert sands, it survived for over 2,000 years to become, according to some, the best preserved temple of the ancient world. Edfu is located about 20 kilometers southeast of Nekhen, the pre-dynastic center of the cult of Horus, the city of the falcons, called Hierakonpolis by the Greeks. Nekhen was the religious and political capital of the legendary rulers of Shem-Suhor, the followers of Horus, who, as is known, also included the first pharaohs of Dynastic Egypt. Already in the Old Kingdom, Edfu was the capital of the second Upper Egyptian nome, called Throne of Horus Land. Without a doubt, we are on the sacred land of Horus, who in Ptolemaic times was identified with Apollo, and the city was called Apollinopolis Magna by the Greeks. The first thing that of course catches our attention are the monumental, perfectly preserved pylons, gate structures erected in front of temples at least since the beginning of the New Kingdom, from the 16th century BC, a symbol of Egyptian sacral architecture. The pylon in Edfu is over 32 meters high and almost 70 meters wide. Just like on the external walls of the New Kingdom monuments, it's decorated with sunk reliefs, monumental reliefs of the victorious king who destroys enemies in front of Horus and Hathor. Although construction of the temple began in 238 BC, during the heyday of the Ptolemaic Empire, in front of us one of its last rulers, Ptolemy XII, an unfortunate figure, hated by his own subjects, ruling Egypt only thanks to his ties to the Roman Republic, at a time when the fate of Egyptian statehood seemed to have been already sealed.
The work on the pylons was finalized in 57 BC by Ptolemy XII, and that's why the whole glory fell upon him, as we can see,
looking at his monumental images.
He was the father of the famous Cleopatra VII, by the way.
Originally, obelisks stood in the front of the pylon, and the pylon's top was decorated with huge flagpoles. The niches and mounting holes are still visible on the temple facade. The pylon isn't a solid structure. There are rooms inside accessible by steep stairs. It's said that the temple treasure was located in these secret rooms. A 14-meter high door made of cedar wood, covered with bronze and gold, led to a spacious courtyard surrounded by 32 columns. This is where the worshippers of Horus gathered during festivals. It's one of about 100 temple complexes built by the Ptolemies, who were constantly seeking the support of the Egyptian clergy, and thus legitimacy in the eyes of their subjects. Unlike the temples at Dendera, Esna, Komombo, Philae or Kalabsha, the project at Edfu was entirely completed by them, so we won't find cartouches of Roman emperors here. The entrance to the pronaos, like the entrance to the pylon, is guarded by massive granite statues of falcons wearing double pshent crown. This is the traditional, animalistic representation of Horus known to the Egyptians at least since the First Dynasty, established around 3000 BC. Horus. His cult was widespread throughout Egypt from pre-dynastic times, and already at the time of the unification of Egypt, at the threshold of the First Dynasty, he was a recognized state deity, as each ruler was considered his living embodiment. He had many aspects and characters, such as Horachte, Haroeris, Harsis, Harendotes, who occupied different places in Egyptian theology and myths. His oldest cult is believed to be that of the falcon-shaped Horus from nearby Nekhen. He was to personify the entire cosmos, and the two visible celestial bodies, the sun and the moon, were to be the pupils of his all-seeing eyes. His eternal enemy was to be Seth, who as a storm god covered these celestial bodies with clouds, which was interpreted as tearing out or gouging out the divine eyes. The fight between Horus and Seth, today known mainly from later Osirian myths, was originally considered a continuous clash of opposing forces of nature. These creative, invigorating, and beneficial for humanity were attributed to Horus. The next form of Horus is Ra-Horachte, the syncretic union of the heavenly Horus and the solar creator of the world, Atum-Ra, who thus gained a falcon-like appearance. This union most probably took place already during the Second Dynasty, as indicated by the Horus name of one of its kings, Nebra, Lord of Ra, and was consolidated during the Third Dynasty when its most eminent ruler, Djoser, took the title of Golden Horus, used interchangeably with Golden Ra. The third important form of Horus, distinguished perhaps in the Old Kingdom, was Haroer, Greek Haroeris, or the so-called Horus the Elder. At that time he was considered one of the sons of Nut, and thus belonged to the Great Ennead, the group of the first gods. It is he who in the pyramid texts plays the role of the avenger of his brother Osiris. In later times he becomes a completely marginal figure, passing on his attributes and mythical threats to Horus the son of Isis, and this most famous Horus takes on different names and forms depending on his age. For example, Harpocrates, Horus the child. Horus above all fulfilled his original and primeval function. He personified the divine, cosmic aspect of kingship, and as such was omnipresent in Egyptian culture for 3000 years, a culture in which the person of the pharaoh always occupied a central place. By the way, I recommend my podcast on Egyptian religion. You can find the link below. Here in Edfu, they worshipped a local version of God called the One of Baghdad. Baghdad is the ancient Egyptian name for Edfu. Okay, let's go inside. The ceiling of the 16-meter-high vestibule is supported by 18 gigantic columns with ornate capitals, each with a unique shape. The motifs come from the diverse flora of Egypt. Palm and lotus flower capitals were commonly used already in the Old Kingdom. But it was only after 2,500 years, in Ptolemaic times, that, in my opinion, true perfection was achieved. The magnificent, monumental capitals are a true symbol of Ptolemaic architecture. The columns, set at a small distance from each other, look like a stone forest. The ceiling, covered with stars, is decorated with inscriptions made using the sunk relief technique. The once bright colors have been largely lost, and one can only guess that they resembled those known to us from the well-preserved ceilings of Esna and Dendera. The ceiling of the Hypostyle hall is supported by 12 slightly lower 10-meter-high pillars. Only priests and high-ranking dignitaries had access here. In the Middle Ages, these interiors were filled almost to the ceiling with sand and various debris. Already then, the entire temple complex was a densely built-up residential settlement, which didn't change until the second half of the 19th century. Unfortunately, the interior was still used by locals who lit fires there, blackening the ceiling and capitals, hence the black coating, which was only partially cleaned off. A French traveler from the 18th century, Nicolas Granger, reports that the inhabitants of the mud brick huts standing on the roof of the temple disposed of their rubbish by throwing it through holes in the roof into the temple, and the piles of it reached the ceiling. The artist Vivant Denon, who arrived here with Napoleon's troops and who later became the first director of the Louvre Museum, claimed that the Temple of Edfu served as a public toilet for the entire village. But the desert sand saved the temple from being dismantled and hid the greater part of the reliefs and inscriptions, thus limiting the amount of destruction done by the oblivious and superstitious Christians and Muslims who consistently destroyed the pagan images. Some of them, although deprived of their original vivid colors, were preserved in excellent condition, as we can see. From here, only a few steps to the sanctuary of Horus, the holiest of holies, the heart of the temple. It's located on the temple axis, behind the vestibule. This room is 5.5 meters wide and 10.5 meters long. The walls are decorated with scenes from the daily ritual of offerings, the celebrant being King Ptolemy IV Philopator, who completed the work on the sanctuary. On the north side in the Holy of Holies is a 4-meter-high naos, carved from a single block of black granite, in which the cult statue was kept, enclosed in an inner portable shrine, most likely magnificently decorated and covered in gold. During festivals, such an inner shrine with the statue of Horus was placed in his ceremonial bark. In the foreground we see a modern replica of such bark. The naos comes from an older temple and is decorated with an inscription by Nectanebo II from the 30th dynasty, the last native pharaoh, who reigned in the 4th century BC. Such granite box-like shrines were supposed to provide protection for the god represented by the statue. Inside them, in complete darkness, there are supposed to be the exact same conditions that God experienced before the creation of the universe. In the side walls of the vestibule, I come across narrow corridors and stairs leading to the roof of the temple with a chapel on it, probably intended for New Year's rituals. The holy statue must have been carried by priests through these narrow corridors, so it's no wonder that they are so beautifully decorated. In the inscription of one of these winding corridors, we read, "The one who illuminates in the morning those who are in the morning boat. The bass of the east rejoices for his Ka. The one who sets in the west at night, the bass of the west receive him in peace. The noble winged disk illuminates the two lands with his rays and causes everyone to see. One who shines with gold, who illuminates cities and nomes." Morning begins in order that he is born to the limit of every day. He is the one who does all this. The lands emerge from the raising of his beauty. He who sails the sky in his boat daily, who sails the sky every day in the morning boat, the great illuminator, who illuminates the two lands from darkness, who illuminates the double sanctuary with his two eyes, who arrives with his Urias, who controls his two lands. The Rakhid people kiss the earth before the bass of his majesty. The king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Horus the Baghdad, the great god, lord of the sky, him of the dappled plumage, who comes forth from the horizon, the foremost of the double sanctuary of the south and the north. A chapel on the temple's roof. Here preparations for the New Year's celebrations took place. Here the holy statue, brought out of the darkness, was illuminated by the first rays of the morning sun. Praise to your face, rejoicing to your Ka, kissing the earth to your noble statue. Horus the Baghdad, the great god, lord of the sky, him of the dappled plumage, who comes forth from the horizon. The noble falcon image of Horus, multicolored, the sacred falcon image provided with wings, the valiant falcon, who is sharp-taloned, who brings an end to the one who attacks his dignity. The white crown of Upper Egypt, the red crown of Lower Egypt, are united on his head, high-plumed, sharp of horns, who carries the flail consisting of the phalluses of his enemies. Like every great Egyptian temple, the Temple of Horus in Edfu houses chapels dedicated to other deities, and there are dozens of them here. Around the sanctuary room, I counted 14 beautifully decorated chapels. Connected by a narrow corridor, they give the impression of a labyrinth. Some rooms are completely dark, others are illuminated by the hypostyle hall or tiny holes in the ceiling. They are dedicated to Menhit, Osiris, Min, and Ra-Horachti. But it is the images of Horus and Hathor that are omnipresent here. Edfu's theology focuses on Horus as the primordial creator god, strongly identified with the wandering sun, and his consort, the equally ancient, powerful solar goddess Hathor, identified here with Maat, the ancient Egyptian concept of both divine cosmic order and balance, and the source of Egyptian ethics. Hathor is the female aspect of the creator god and at the same time the mythological wife of Horus, according to Osirian myths, constitutes the triad of Edfu, with him and their son, the child god Harsomptus. His name translates as Horus who unites two lands. This Ptolemaic deity personifies the primordial form of the sun, associated with its first morning rays. The Mamisi of Edfu is the place of his birth. I'll show it to you in one of the next episodes, so don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you. One of the main festivals celebrated here was the annual visit paid to her divine husband by the goddess Hathor of Dendera, accompanied by countless crowds of her worshippers. Her statue traveled several days up the Nile in a sacred bark, surrounded by a retinue of boats. The goddess reached Edfu on the day of the new moon at the end of summer. Horus would then leave his temple and greet his wife on the river, then share his sanctuary with her. After 2 weeks of ritual renewal of their marriage, the goddess Hathor would return home to Dendera. Another important event was the Festival of the Living Falcon, an annual celebration of the coronation of the sacred bird and the re-establishment of the pharaoh's kingship and power. The ritual began with bringing the main statue of Horus from his sanctuary into the Temple of the Sacred Falcon, an outer, now vanished structure where priests raised falcons. Although the only living embodiment of Horus was generally considered to be the pharaoh, his followers eventually succumbed to the zulatry that was becoming increasingly popular in Ptolemaic Egypt. Edfu thus had its own sacred animal and oracle. On the day of the festival, one of the birds raised by the priest was chosen by the statue of Horus as the rightful heir. Such a special falcon became a living, breathing vessel of his Ba, manifestation of physical power. It was called the living falcon and the sacred animal of Horachti. In order to show the crowd the newly chosen incarnation of the god, the falcon and the statue of Horus of Baghdad were carried to the top of the temple gate. Then the animal was crowned in the temple. Due to its status, the sacred falcon of Edfu enjoyed the privilege of living in the temple. It was fed special meat dishes, including donkey meat, which at that time symbolized Seth, who was an enemy of Horus. Set, a primeval deity once associated with royalty and violent natural phenomena, in Ptolemaic times personified chaos and evil in general, becoming the Egyptian equivalent of the devil. The mythological fight of Horus with the evil Seth can be admired on the interior face of the enclosure wall of the temple, in the so-called The Triumph of Horus over his enemies, or the sacred drama of Horus at Edfu. The text, which includes dialogues and monologues of the characters, somewhat resembles Greek tragedy. However, it's believed that this drama was originally composed much earlier, during the late New Kingdom. Each scene is illustrated with relief. Popular in Egypt for hundreds of years, Osirian myths describe among others the fight of Horus with Seth in the form of a hippopotamus, a motif that the theologians of Edfu were particularly fond of. We read, Horus in his strength has united the two lands. Seth is overthrown in the form of a hippopotamus. The falcon goddess has come to the house of Horus, and she says to her son, Your foes bow down and are destroyed forever, O you avenger of your father. This victory was celebrated at the end of the season of growth, Peret, which makes it the next, already the fourth festival of Edfu. As you can see, I'm now walking around the temple, we are now looking at its northern walls, also covered with inscriptions. The temple is like one big library. Ptolemaic scribes copied texts from previous periods, written in a language they themselves didn't use. To bring it back to life, they introduced a new system of hieroglyphs. Since the 1980s, German Egyptologists led by Dieter Kurth have been conducting the so-called Edfu project, the aim of which is to translate all of these texts. Can't wait to see the results. In contrast to the excellently preserved inscriptions, the temple reliefs fell victim to vandalism. Late antiquity Egypt had already been mainly Christianized, and images of gods became easy targets.
Destroying entire images was too difficult and too time-consuming, so they hacked out faces, arms and legs.
Living under the rule of the Christian emperors, the priests of Horus were unable to maintain the full functioning of the traditional cult, because their economic resources were insufficient and the temple simply too large. They probably ended up worshipping their gods in only a few rooms, while others were converted into warehouses or homes. Perhaps in this way the temple cult slowly faded away and ended in a gradual process, for which we have no hard historical evidence. This might have happened at the turn of the 4th and 5th centuries. Eventually, the Christian inhabitants of the city of Edfu took full possession of the huge temple complex. They lived and worked there, seeking shelter behind its high walls, more and more buried by the desert sands. However, the temple's huge pylon has always been visible and has attracted the attention of travelers and researchers. The first to excavate the temple was a French Egyptologist, Auguste Mariette, around 1860. The first comprehensive research was carried out here in the 1930s by a Polish-French mission on the initiative of Kazimierz Michałowski. Currently, mainly Germans work here. The vast space between the Ptolemaic enclosure wall and the massive external enclosure walls of late antiquity is now occupied by the open-air museum, where objects from different periods are exhibited, especially those from Roman times. We know that here in Apollonopolis Magna, a legion of the Imperial Roman army was stationed from the 2nd century AD, guarding the southern borders of the province of Aegyptus. In the 5th century, Apollonopolis Magna was part of the province of Thebais Superior, and there are many late Roman and Byzantine remains, the most impressive of which is the gigantic enclosure wall, built of traditional Egyptian mud brick. Interestingly, earlier pharaonic enclosure walls from various periods were incorporated into it, including those built in the Pyramid Age.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, I recommend you to watch my previous episodes from Egypt, also from Italy, Malta or Greece.
Are you new here? Would you like to learn more about ancient Egyptian beliefs and history? Then I recommend you my podcast where I explore in detail the cosmology and myths of ancient Egypt. Link below in the description. Did you enjoy it? Would you like to help me continue this? Then please join my Patreon community. Link below the video. Please like, comment and share my video with your friends. I'd like to thank all the supporters of my channel.
Thank you all my patrons.
Thanks to you, I can create this content. See you on another ancient site.